Hey, Paul, my earlier meeting ended earlier than expected. So I am here today. And
Yay.
Very good.
okay.
Was that KIUC meeting?
Get it all figured out?
Yeah, we're good. We're now live. I'm still, so Betsy, is Yap going to be coming?
Yes, my understanding is that he is going to be presenting.
Okay, yeah. All right, I guess we could start this though, and we can start with a quick round of introductions again by ESRC. I guess we could start with Jim.
Okay, good morning. I'm Jim Jacoby with U.S. Geological Survey, Pacific Island Ecosystems Research Center, and sitting in for Gordon Tribble on the USGS seat on the ESRC.
Thank you. Michelle?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Michelle Bugartis. I'm the Deputy Field Supervisor for the Pacific Islands Fish and Wildlife Office, sitting in for our Field Supervisor, Earl Campbell.
Very good. Lisa?
Good morning. I'm Lisa Hadway Spain, and I am on Hawaii Island, and I'm an ESRC member at large.
Very good. And then what I see right now is lastly, Dave.
Yeah, good morning, David Smith. I'm the administrator with the Division of Forest and Wildlife here in Honolulu. And I am sitting in place of Suzanne Case, who's the chairperson for the Department of Land and Natural Resources.
All right, and that's all I see at the moment. I guess we could give this a few minutes and wait for Yap to come on because he's first, but oh, here we got Loyal coming on.
Do we not have Melissa and Kavika today?
I don't see Melissa here. I don't recall if she was going to be able to make it. I know Kavika said he sounded like he might have some conflicts today, but I wasn't sure about Melissa.
I know
So
she's
Loyal,
in California, so she might have trouble.
oh, she is. Okay. So Loyal, we just did a round of introductions. You want to introduce yourself real quickly?
And I will probably be off my video because I seem to be having some trouble with the not only me aligning it, but also with the bandwidth I've got right now. So I'll probably be invisible for a while.
Okay.
But I'll be here. Thanks.
You want to get a quick introduction, Loyal?
Did you hear me or not?
I heard you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. All right, looks like we have Melissa here. Hey, Melissa, we just did a quick round of introductions. You want to introduce yourself quickly, if you can?
Apologies for being a couple minutes late. My name is Melissa Price, and I'm here on behalf of the University of Hawaii.
Very good, thank you. And one quick announcement before, while we wait for Yap to jump on. The Kauai Seabird HCP presentation annual review will probably be sometime between 7 and 18 March is what Kate told me. She's waiting for things to come together with all the independent individuals at that end.
Oh, did you say 17 and 18 or 7 and 18?
7 and 18. That's somewhere in that window is all she said.
Okay, thank you very much.
Window. Hey, Paul, that window is closing up quickly, so the sooner the better. I know that there's a lot of different permittees to coordinate for that, but if there's anything that we can do to try and get it on the books within the next week or two, that'd be good.
All right, I'll let her know that. Okay, it looks like Yap is having a bit of difficulty. I'm gonna go off. All right, Yap should be here momentarily. And Kavika is now on. Kavika, we did a round of introductions. You want to introduce yourself quickly?
Aloha, Kavika Winter, sitting in native Hawaiian seat on ESRC. Thank you.
Very good. Our first presenter, Yap, should be, he's coming up right now.
Which document are we going to be working on first, or which project?
This is going to be the Kenai Industrial Park HCP, Akranthes. So Yap, I have made you co-host so you can begin your presentation whenever you're ready.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Good morning. Good morning, committee. Let me get my slides going real quick. Apologies for the delay. I got clicked the wrong Zoom link for this meeting. My bad. Also, apologies if my voice gives out from time to time. It's a little rough this morning. Okay. Here we go. Let's see. Here we go. Good morning. Apologies. So yeah, thanks. This is for the annual review for the KIP Akranthes mitigation project. We'll start out with a quick overview of the project, kind of based on the slide deck that Paul had provided us with. Also on the line, hopefully if everything went well, we have Danielle Froelich, a botanist from our office, and Betsy Wilson representing the project ownership on the line as well. So we have those resources if there's any questions at the end. Excuse me. A quick project background. Are you able to see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. Always worth checking. Let me advance the slides if that works. Okay, here we go. So quick project background. The project was originally developed by Syria Land Company, and then it was acquired by AKC Leasing Corporation. It's a single species incenol take license, so just Akranthes, Splendens rotundata. We'll just refer to it as Akranthes. It was developed to offset project impacts to three Akranthes. That was the take request on a small 0.75 acre industrial lot at Kenai Industrial Park, which is within Campbell Industrial Park. The main goal, oh, I'm so sorry, hang on. Let me switch something over real quick.
Yeah, do you mind if I interject that the actual take was 2 plants, not 3?
Yeah, thanks, Betsy. That's right. So the requested take was 3, but the actual take was, in fact, just 2 plants that were removed from the site. I just realized I had put up the wrong version of this slideshow I thought was going so well. And here we go. So let me share the correct one with you all. Okay. And we're back. Hopefully this shows the February 4th, 2022 slideshow. I have two very similar ones because we talked just, I believe it was August 2021 about this project, and already have provided a lot of updates from where we are currently. So actual take of two individuals. Mitigation consisted of planting and maintaining Acarantes at the Kalealoa unit of Pearl Harbor National Wildlife Refuge. From genetic stock, it says seed and cuttings because that's the language in the HCP, but they were all grown from seeds of individuals at the KNI site, as well as from an additional nearby seed source that was the city and county site. The mitigation duration goal was 5 years. We're currently presenting results from year 7. So we are 2 years into adaptive management. So we have a few things to talk about in that regard. Proposed the mitigation site, no longer proposed. And the project site are shown here on the map in yellow. On the left-hand side is the project site, and then I'm sorry, is the additional seed source. Up top, the orange site is the project area. And in green down below here is the Kalailo unit of the National Wildlife Refuge, Pearl Harbor, where the outplanting took place. Just to zoom in of the project site, was a small area surrounded by industrial use. We've described it previously. It's situated somewhat lower, and so water from surrounding areas kind of ends up running off down into this area. It was just a heavy Piave canopy with some buffalo grass inside, and then there were, when vegetation clearing happened, there were 2 Acarantes left at the site. Just for those not familiar with the plants, just a couple of pictures here of a tagged mature plant with some seedlings underneath, and then a picture of the area where there's some Acarantes in the Lima interspersed in this area. All right, adaptive management started after year 5. There was additional weeding done, additional pest control, additional planting. There was an event where 60 plants were planted in April 2020. But it turned out there was no water on site, and none of the plants survived. It was an unfortunate event. 2021, there was additional adaptive management continued. All permits were renewed. There's further additional weeding, pest control, and outplanting. At this point, the ownership's horticultural team took over the additional weeding and pest control. Planting was done by Taylor Marsh from Native Ecosystems, and 57 additional plants that were still left in the nursery were installed on June 2nd, 2021. They were watered, and they have had, as far as I am aware, pretty good survival. So at the end of the reporting period, we had 0 original outplants, something that we've discussed before. From the 2021 outplants, there were 57. There were 64 total progeny for a total of 121 plants. The mitigation success criteria were as follows. We had Criterion 1 that we've discussed quite a bit. 75% at this point by years 4 and 5 of the original outplants were to survive. That unfortunately did not happen. Turned out that the plants were not as long-lived as we had anticipated when the HCP was developed and approved. and there was mutual agreement that this criterion should be eliminated. The second criterion, there should be recruitment of seedlings that survive through the dry season in absence of any supplemental watering. Seed production by at least 25% of the outplanted lineages by year 5. The third one, number of seedlings recruited into the mature age class must be greater than the mortality rate of existing adult plants over a 5-year period, with a minimum recruitment of 25% of the number of outplanted individuals. Number 4, no fewer than 120 mature plants, which will include plants recruited from the planted lineages by year 5. And then 5, cover of herbaceous non-native plants will be less than 25% within the planting plots by year 5. No mature Kiava will be within the planting plots over the 5-year period, and native plant species cover within the planting plots will be greater than 25% by year 5. Some considerations related to these success criteria. There are no success criteria beyond year 5, and we are reporting on year 7. Success criteria, with one exception, were met in 2019, actually, which was year 5, and I think that we may have skipped over that a little bit. The mitigation ratio is specifically called out in the HCP. On page 27, it says a mitigation ratio of 30:1. With a take request of 3, that target would be 90, and an actual take of 2, that is actually 60, rather than 120, which is called out in the mitigation ratio. So there's a discrepancy between the intent and the numbers that were eventually in the success criteria, the hard numbers. Mitigation criteria were based on the criterion that 75% of the outplants would survive by year 5. So when it says the minimum criteria for recruitment was at least 25% of that 120, which would be 30 recruits. And so overall, the success of this project has well exceeded the concern that there wouldn't be sufficient recruitment based on the intent and the language of the HCP and the discussions we had at the time. And then wanted to point out, again, we're in year 7 of adaptive management, and so there's been a substantial effort expended to date. Now, I wanted to touch on a couple of things related to mitigation success criteria, as we received a letter from DOFA staff as feedback to the annual report, which has been shared with you also. And we haven't had a chance yet to provide DOFA with a direct response, so I wanted to go over some of our responses to these comments, since it affects the evaluation of the performance of this mitigation so far. Okay. Take a sip of water real quick. All right. We'll leave the success criteria up, since this is related to an evaluation of the success criteria. We appreciate frank discussion of the key issues here. But with regard to this letter, we do feel that the timeliness and the context of the feedback have not been very constructive in successfully implementing the mitigation plan. We have provided annual reports that were very detailed, and ongoing feedback on some of these items would have been really helpful through the duration of this project, rather than getting a letter filled with criticism at the end of year 7 when we're already well in 2 years into adaptive management. For criterion number 1, with regard to the outplanted individual survivorship, there was a comment from DOFA staff that there was a misrepresentation of how the removal of the success criterion came about. We had requested the removal based on information from botanists that have worked with the species, presented that at the ESRC, and this was specifically related to the longevity of the species in general, not specific to this site. And that was what the removal was based on. This language has been in the past 4 annual reports. And so it wasn't our intention to misrepresent, and I don't think that we misrepresented the direction that we had from DOFA staff. The other thing that was mentioned under Criterion 1 in this letter was related to other outplanting of this species, specifically grown from material collected at the KIP project site, stating that some of those plants had lived longer than 5 years. This is the first time that we heard as a project team that other plants were grown from this stock, and that there had been these projects ongoing. It would have been very helpful to have had that information shared with the project team, so we could discuss and compare, what is going well on one side versus the other, and help make this project more successful. I think that would have benefited the project and conservation of the species overall. For criterion number 2, about the recruitment of seedlings through the summer, we also disagree with DOFA's assessment in this letter. Regarding the watering, the original outplants were watered during the 120-day establishment period. In 2015, after which there was no water on site until the permit holder actually fixed the irrigation system for the June 2021 outplants. So we want to make clear that there was no irrigation between 2015 and June 2021. So the recruitment and survival during those years happened in absence of any supplemental watering, which ties directly into the success criterion, which specifically states recruitment of seedlings that survive through dry season with absence of supplemental watering. The tracking lineages, that is something that we that was also mentioned under Criterion 2. Seed production by at least 25% of the outplanted lineages. This is something that we talked about in August. There were 2 sources. One was the project site, the other was the city and county site. It was the outplanting was done through an outplanting plan, which has been which was submitted prior to all of the outplanting. And then the reporting of the 120-day establishment period, everything has been reported and has been clear on the record of how things have been how things have been planned and executed. The plants came from 50% from KIP stock and 50% from the city and county side stock. And all of the outplanted plants actually were flowered and set seed. So I think it's pretty clear that that criterion has been met. At least 25% of the outplanted lineages have successfully set seed. For criterion number 3, and for this I'll need to advance the slide. Sorry, my voice is giving out. Excuse me. Okay, for Criterion 3, we agree with DOFA that as is written in the annual report, strictly speaking, the number of progeny was recruited into mature class does not exceed the mortality of the outplanted individuals. All of the outplanted individuals have perished, and we do not have 120 plus mature plants from recruitment at this point. But we do want to point out that the minimum recruitment according to the success criterion was 25%, because 75% of the outplanted individuals were expected to be alive by year 5. We didn't address this when we agreed to remove the first success criterion, but we should have acknowledged this. The recruitment was at 97 individuals in May 2020. This was in year 5, which really far exceeded the expectations on which the success criteria were based, right? The 25% of the outplanted individuals. In addition, the actual take was 2 plants. And with all of this in mind, we do ask for some leniency when evaluating the success criterion. The last one that I wanted to talk about is the 4th success criterion. There was a comment about not being able to count outplanted individuals, mature individuals, because there had been watering of the outplanted plants. We disagree with the statement that these would be required to have a specific time to survive without supplemental watering. The success criteria specifically state that the watering criterion applies to the progeny. Supplemental planting is actually the only specific measure that's identified in the adaptive management section of the HCP. And this has been implemented to achieve the success criterion and to compensate for the higher than expected mortality of the originally installed plants. So we do think that credit should be given for these outplants. We also take issue with the statement that the failed outplanting in 2020 reflects on the overall project management. And the statement also misrepresents SWCA's reporting on this matter. We did go out and monitored the plants within 4 days after the plants were installed. And at that point, the plants had already died. And so there was no more time for corrective measures. It does not reflect the overall approach to the project or performance on project management or execution for that matter. Same thing when it comes to any kind of management actions over the course of especially the first 5 years of the project, where SWCA has provided consistent feedback in writing, which has been included in reporting, and those have been executed by the horticulturist and the field people throughout the duration of the project. To kind of close this and start a conversation, hopefully, we would like to establish some clear expectations and mutually acceptable endpoint for this mitigation project. Considering the fact that this was based on a 30-to-1 mitigation ratio, a total take of 2 individual plants from an industrial park, and the shorter than expected lifespan of the outplanted individuals, I do hope that we can agree on a reasonable approach to close out this project. The permittee, AKC Leasing Corporation, does intend to plant 100 cuttings that were taken from the mitigation site and that are currently at the nursery as soon as possible at an acceptable location. And we can talk about some level of maintenance for these plants to ensure maximum survival through the dry season. So we'd appreciate a discussion of the final adaptive management measures, so we can get to a reasonable endpoint for this mitigation project. Thanks.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. The first one is just a clarification. It's really more aimed at the state and Fish and Wildlife. I guess it's the state in this case here. My understanding is that it's the take request is what determines what the mitigation obligation is. It's not the actual take, and that's certainly, I just don't, if that's the case, I don't want to set a precedent that it's other than that, because for example, with bats and so forth, the take is so much, the mitigation is aims at that so much. Not the take is so much, it's what the mitigation is determined by the take requested. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's fine. I just mentioned it as a to share the reality, and this was part of the slide deck that we received from DOFA as the information that was to be shared, what the actual take is, and that's fine. The requested take was 3, and mitigation is for the requested take, in which case 30-to-1 ratio gets you to 90 individuals.
Okay, no, I just want to make sure that was clarified, because otherwise it could cause confusion later on in terms of a precedent and so forth. And sorry to hear you're sort of under the weather. Yeah, I know
it's a scary time to be under the weather.
Every single safe harbor and HCP is sort of a unique case, and this certainly is one here in terms of the specifics of the project and so forth. I appreciate you going through and talking about the different issues raised in the DOFA letter. But what I'd really like to do is I'd like to, before we proceed with other questions, is just ask if someone in DOFA, either Dave or Matt or Susan, could sort of respond to some of the questions, or at least point out the concerns you have, and get that part of the discussion going.
Sure.
I'll leave that to Paul. I think his group was the one that responded. Was that you guys, Paul, that responded to that, or was that?
It was based on input from primarily Matt. So I'm hoping he's available. He's here.
Hello. Yes, I'm standing by if there's any questions.
Yeah, Matt, could you just sort of, maybe sort of characterize the concerns you've got, and then maybe respond to some of the points that Yap has brought up?
Yeah, sure, I can do that. I guess maybe I had one question first, and maybe for Paul. For the Criterion 1, I understand that was not ever removed from the project. Is that the case?
I don't have enough of that history to give a really good answer to that, unfortunately.
I can say a couple of things about that.
Okay.
We have been talking about this for several years, and I want to say since 2018 or 2019, definitely 2019 at the latest. There's a lot of back and forth. We had conversations with Glenn Metzler and Matt. Yep, Matt Care on the line here. About an approach to the success criterion in light of the plants dying, and at some point if the mortality exceeds what the HCP states, there's no meeting that success criterion, because we can't go back in time and make them live longer. And based on information that we had from Bruce Kobola, hopefully I don't mispronounce his name. We agreed that it would be reasonable to remove the success criterion, because there's still the mitigation ratio would still remain intact. There was a lot of back and forth on the follow-up after the ESRC asked the DOFA staff to work on removing those success criteria, either administratively or through a BLNR. I have some correspondence that I'm happy to share with DOFA staff. There was several promises that there would be a board submittal, which never happened. We actually drafted a draft board submittal ourselves to help speed up the process, and the follow-up on the DOFA end just never materialized. So there was no concrete action taken, at least not with the board, to remove the success criterion.
This is Matt here again. Thanks. Yeah, that's what I remembered as well. And I was involved in the correspondence to support the removal of Criterion 1A, stating that 100% of 120 outplanted individuals will survive by year one. That was not a practical goal for any outplanting of endangered species. And I think you'll find in that same correspondence, starting in 2018, when I was brought onto DOFA, that we did never agree on the expected lifespan for these plants. I understand that in previous reports, you reported that your contractor, Matt Sherman at Huiku, had reported that these plants were expected to live shorter than 5 years. And then we gave some other examples of how plants grown from this stock, as we discussed in 2018, were being maintained by DOFA and were being used in outplanting. And we have correspondence about that. And that they were surviving for longer than 5 years. And in fact, plants at the secondary seed source site, which is one on city and county land and one on private land at Island Recycling, those plants are still persisting, and they are there, and they're have been monitored for longer than 5 years. So all indications are that this plant is able to live as long as the expected lifespan projected at the beginning of the project. I understand you have opinions disagreeing with that, but that's the opinion that DOFA has been presenting since 2018. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm maintaining that I disagree. We can dig through the records and waste a lot of time. Ultimately, though, it's moot. The plants are dead, right? And we can't bring them back to life. So one way or another, we have to move on. And we do have correspondence that DOFA agreed. We have, in fact, minutes from the ESRC meeting that the ESRC agreed, based on the facts that were presented at the time, that success criterion should be removed. I don't see a point in further spending a lot of time discussing this, but be happy to if you want to.
Yeah,
agreed. I'm just responding. So I agree that the Criterion 1 should be removed, and we supported that. And thanks for clarifying that just wasn't followed up with the board.
So Matt, other thoughts on relative to the issues that DOFA has brought up, and I'm just trying to figure out how we move forward from here. I think there is a lot of potential for solving this issue, ecologically, and I think that's really what the ESRC is wanting to help with. As far as administrative rules and so forth, that's out of our bailiwick. That's totally the agencies in terms of doing that. So, are there other ecological issues that you can talk about in terms of the things that you've questioned, and how can we resolve those?
Yeah, sure. Maybe one other thing to mention is just the timing of the outplanting. So when the plants were installed and not watered, that was done during a dry season. And then again in 2021, the plants were installed at the beginning of the dry season. And so that just runs counter to the recommendations we made for best practices for outplanting. And we feel it contributed a lot to the mortality of those plants. If they were dead after 4 days, it's pretty clear. So that wasn't a success. So we do see that there are, we've been issuing permits and they do have cuttings alive with their new contractor, and we support those being outplanted on the site. And like we talked about in August, we do feel that there has been overall benefit because these genetic lines are being maintained. There was storage and there were successful recruitment from the outplanting at the site. We did a site visit in 2021, and we did note that watering was ongoing. And so there might be, it's not totally clear to us who is doing the watering at this point, but the seedlings, including the ones that were in the very first picture you showed, were being watered at the time. So the plants that are alive, including the recruited individuals, have been watered now for many, many months. So maybe that's worth noting. But I agree, Jim. I think there's a way forward. There's been success with some of the sites at the refuge, and they have more plants at the nursery ready to go. And I believe that would be a benefit to the species and to the site.
Yeah, good. No, thanks, Matt. I do think this is solvable. A couple of questions in terms of sites. First of all, is there? I just want to get a confirmation that there's been a commitment from Fish and Wildlife Service to continue managing, this site and these species after this HCP is completed. Is that in place?
It is. There was a commitment letter that was signed before the HCP was approved and was appended to the HCP.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was confirmed because I know we had talked about it a few times in the past. And then secondly, is Jaap, you talked about having additional cuttings and so forth to be planted in another site. Is that another site on this area or in a different location altogether?
Yeah, thanks for that question. That's actually one of the key things that I wanted to bring up and was hoping to get input on. So, what we're hearing from Matt now is that there's been planting even from the same stock and some other sites that have been more successful. We have very little information, like I said before, about this. This means that either there's a potential for maintenance recommendations from DOFA, or there may be better sites. I mean, this site. This site is at the refuge is extremely harsh. I think I've mentioned before that we jokingly refer to it as Mordor. It's very hot, very dry, and pests are definitely a problem at the site. And that's something that we've gotten some feedback on from DOFA as well in terms of pest control. So it requires some actual management. And so, we're going back and forth about watering, we're going back and forth about potentially about weed control and pest control. Those all roll together into active management, however you want to see that. But it does look like there may be better sites out there to put these plants where they may have better survival and maybe even better recruitment. And so that's a conversation we would like to have agreement on what would be the best site to put these 100 cuttings and give them the maximum potential for survival and reproduction.
And I think that's good. And I think we should have that conversation, and maybe not at this meeting here, but have some sort of a working group that can help address that. And it'd be good to include a few folks from the ESRC on that, just so we have a connection with it. There's no question Acaranthes is adapted to very harsh conditions. I mean, something was growing there and so forth, although conditions have changed from, human times, certainly in terms of invasive species and pests and things like that. So the rules have changed. And but I think the other thing that I think I really want to stress is the fact that it's not just the approach should not be how do we get these individual plants to survive. We've had the same kind of dilemma with another project, with the Butalon project. It's not only about the plants, it's the plants within the context of some sort of a matrix that's other than just simply the monoculture of those species. And I think that's really an important approach that I really want to make sure is integrated into not only the current management here, but if other sites are looked at, is that mix of species in a habitat, rather than just trying to get as many plants growing in one site as you possibly can. I think that's an important thing that may help mitigate some of the issues in terms of moisture and so forth, as well as even invasive grasses.
Okay, I want to make sure that we don't get into the couple of concerns here. First is the timeline. We have those plants that need to be planted as soon as possible. I would really appreciate a conversation, but establishing a special committee and then having or a working group and then having conversations, that sounds like something that's going to take a significant amount of time. Like I said, we're a couple of years into adaptive management. The project team does want to contribute to the conservation of the species and wants to make sure that the intent of the HCP is satisfied. But I also think that we can argue that for the most part, the success criteria have been met, not now, but in year 5. And I'm willing to go back and highlight what that looks like. And so I don't want to set the expectations too high that we're going to start over with a new set of plans and creating a whole nother place where there's sort of a small restoration project that's going to be established. I think that goes beyond what's reasonable, and I think it goes beyond what the project financially could carry. So I want to express those concerns here for this process.
This is Loyal. So we can talk about other sites in that area. I mean, I only know of 3 sites that have acranthes or have in the recent past. Matt may know of more. And so if you do know of more, I know basically the 3 mitigation sites, this mitigation site that we're talking about now, that was on Kenai, which was, as I've said before in the past, was set aside to save some plants when the rest of the project site was developed in the early 1990s. And then the 2 other sites that are also mitigation sites. Those are the only ones I know that had live plants in them. Matt, do you know of other sites out there?
There is the Kalaeloa Heritage Park site, and we're still, I think, working to determine which of those are wild and which have been outplanted. Susan's been doing some more monitoring of that site recently.
So are any of those sites ones that would be better sites to look at? Do they have original substrate, for example?
Yes, the city and county, the island recycling, and the Kalaeloa Heritage Park all appear to have original substrate with sinkholes and live plants. We also did find this plant growing on the cliffs of Makaha. So it's a pretty different substrate and a pretty different habitat, but there were reported to be many plants in that area as well.
So I know 2 of those at least are already mitigation sites, right? Of those other 3 sites. I don't know about the heritage site. Is that already a mitigation site for something?
Not that I'm aware of. But the other 2, right, are the old plant sanctuary sites.
Right.
May I speak a moment?
Okay.
May I contribute? I did some research and saw that Kuiku outplanted 800 plants with volunteers from Kamehameha schools. Do you know where those were planted?
I'm sorry, I don't. I'd be interested to find out though.
What year was that? Do you know?
I believe that the, yep, did I send you that? I think it was 2018.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. I can pull it up.
They did that with some volunteers from Kamehameha schools. That sounded like a lot of plants, and it came from Huiku, and they are the ones who took the original plants from our site. The other thing is, I went out, or one of my friends went out to Huiku and purchased these plants for landscaping. So I intend to purchase some and put them back on the site where they were taken from to landscape that site.
2013, sorry.
Okay. And the plants I purchased were just like 2 weeks ago. $10 a plant. So I'm wondering, are our plants being used for their commercial enterprise or our lineage?
Yeah, the plants that were obtained from your site are not approved for commercial use.
I'm not sure what lineage they're using then. Because it's Acaranthus, it's the name that's on ours, it's
Yeah.
rotundum.
I know that there have been plants taken from the other 2 mitigation sites as well. And there probably were some taken from other locations, but I'm not sure what those lineages are. The botanical gardens might know, but I don't.
The plants that my friend purchased do have the labels on them from DOFA.
Right. So we have approved commercial use for Huiku to use the lineage that they obtained from Pat's Island Delights. It's a old time plant nursery, and they obtained that lineage many years ago. So that is approved. So if you're purchasing plants from Huiku, it's from an unknown site that has gone through many years of cultivation, and we don't recommend those to be used in any restoration projects.
Okay. We haven't used them in restoration. I just purchased them for landscaping use.
So, and one thing on the criteria that we've been talking about is, you know, my personal feeling is that these plants typically in the wild were longer lived than 5 years. They may not be in certain sites depending upon the load of introduced pests and things like that. But I mean, that's maybe part of what they have to deal with in that site. But, you know, I think that it's not unusual to expect that they would last 5 years. But regardless, if they don't meet that criteria and the agencies, the applicant or the permit holder rather, and then the ESRC all think that's a good idea to not do that particular criterion, I don't have a real problem with that. But that doesn't mean that the remaining criteria should be just considered to be the only thing that needs to be met in the absence of that one criterion, which was an important criteria because it was to maintain a certain level of mature plants. When you look at the overall intent of what you wanted to get, the reality was you wanted to establish a new population where mortality was less than recruitment, so that it was going to be in an effective outplanting site. I honestly am not sure that I know of any mitigation outplanting sites for plants that have been successful, as many as have been tried. But certainly it's not unreasonable to expect that you would meet the criterion for and have established plants, which means more than you just plant them out there and they survive a year. That's not establishment. So I do think that, there's a way forward with criteria, but it's not a super simple fix. Well, we just go with what's left of the remaining criteria and parse it down.
Okay. Let me go back then to where I think the outplanting fits within these success criteria. The success criteria, number 4 specifically that you're mentioning, no fewer than 100 mature plants will be established by year 5, as well as the number of seedlings recruited into the mature age class. These Criterion 4 says which no fewer than 120 mature plants, which will include plants recruited from the planted lineages, will be established by year 5. By year 5. In 2019, which was year 5, we had 50 remaining outplants, original outplants, 72 recruits for 129 plants. That means that that success criteria was met at that point by year 5. It doesn't say anywhere that it needs to be maintained for years afterwards until through some process it's okayed that it doesn't have to keep having to be reevaluated each year. It says by year 5. So I think that success criterion has already been met, as well as the number of seedlings recruited into the mature age class, as well as all of the other ones except for criterion number 1, which we had agreed to remove. So I think altogether, the success criteria as they were written have been met. I think where the planting comes in is we're still having some heartache over the total number of plants after year 5. And there was some mortality after this period where the number of plants went down, primarily because the original outplants ended up dying off. And that's where these additional outplantings come in. The original conversation about outplantings were because there were a number of plants in the nursery that were grown from the original stock that were still there, and they needed somewhere to go. That would augment the mitigation success for this project. So, there was some failure there with the original outplants, and then the second round was successful, just to be sure additional cuttings were taken under permit for this project to further augment the number of outplants and the success of this mitigation success. And that's where I think the outplanting comes in, not to make not to meet the stretch goal that these success criteria appear to be becoming.
I'm not sure I follow you.
I'm saying the success criteria have been met, except for the first success criterion, which we have already discussed, and that everyone here on the line has agreed that should be removed from the HCP. There's additional planting to augment the success, the mitigation success, but I don't even think that it ties directly into meeting these success criteria.
I'm still not following you.
What the success criterion that you're referring to, Loyal, number 4, it says no fewer than 120 mature plants, which will include plants recruited from the planted lineages, will be established by year 5. In 2019, April 2019, we had 50 original outplants, 79 recruits for a total of 129 plants. at the end of this last year, as I showed on the slides, we had 121 plants based on the, yeah, I can put the slide back up.
So that's 121 plants that were recruited into the site, not outplanted into the site.
No, including outplants. It has to, the success criterion says that they have to be established by year 5, which they were, and that they have to include plants that were recruited from the outplanted lineages, which it did.
Yeah, but you can't outplant plants and count them as established unless they've been there for a while.
In 2019, the plants that had been there were either planted in 2014 or had been recruited since 2014, absent a supplemental watering for 4 to 5 years. I think we can call that established.
Can I just jump in for a second and ask a quick question? And I don't know if this is appropriately answered by Yap or Matt or Paul, but can anyone recall exactly what the language of the actual incidental take license is? I understand the success criteria in the other documents, but I just actually want to have a sense of what it specifically says in the license.
Okay. That's a good question. I can't answer that immediately without.
It's okay, and it
digging
doesn't
up
have
the
to be
idea.
right now, but to me that does make a difference to some extent.
Sure.
Thanks, yeah.
This is Matt here. I have a question maybe for Yap. The Criterion 4 says no fewer than 120 mature plants. Can you please confirm that the recruited individuals that you're counting are indeed flowering mature individuals?
Myself on mute. Rookie mistake. I was saying that was a point of discussion. There's no definition of mature in the HCP, and we do have data on flowering and fruiting of recruited individuals at the site, so I'd have to look at that. But this just includes plants that were tagged, which I think is based on a size class. Is that right, Danielle?
That's correct. Yeah. So input from Bruce was that by the time they reach about 6 inches, they're able to reproduce, and so we started counting them into the population when they reach 6 inches.
It would be good to have that kind of a discussion with ESRC rather than just with an outside contractor. So we're all on the same page on that.
Bruce wasn't a contractor with us. He was just somebody I consulted as to the life history of the species.
Yeah, I know he is, but my point is again, it would, if it's something that affects the interpretation within the ESRC, that would be important to bring to the ESRC.
Well, it's been, Daniel, correct me if I'm wrong, it's been reported in our in all of our reports, annual reports and monitoring reports, correct?
Yes.
There you go. And Michelle, meanwhile, I was able to pull up the ITL.
I see that. Yeah. Thank you for
Okay.
pulling that up. That's super helpful.
Okay, and so it just pulls out these four special four criteria as special conditions.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. And I do think that all of these were met.
Just for clarification, are the recruits tagged as well, or just the outplants?
Yeah, the recruits have been tagged during the 5-year monitoring period, as well as the outplants.
Yeah, we tagged and separately tracked all the recruits.
I'll just say that I'm hearing some fundamental disagreements about whether or not success criteria have adequately been met or not, and where we go from here. I don't know if we're going to resolve that on the call today, but how do we want to proceed? Is this an ESRC review component, or is this a DOFA needs to sit down and work directly with YAP and team? I'm comfortable with either, but I'm hesitant to weigh in more heavily until we have a direction of what it is that we're attempting to get to today.
Yeah, and just to jump in, I mean, this is meant to be an informational meeting. It's not a decision-making meeting at this point, and and I appreciate the input that's come in both from YAP and the project, as well as from DOFA and other folks on the call here. But just to channel Linda, I mean, we need to have it on the agenda if we're going to have a decision-making process. And my understanding is issues such as this would come to the ESRC in terms of if it's a question of whether a project meets the criteria and gets a final check off, that would be an ESRC review, with obviously with strong input from the agencies. But anyway, in any case, I think we need to move it on to a decision-making item on an agenda at a future meeting.
Yeah, Jim, we've been told in the context of this project, the expectation of the process, ESRC advises DOFA and the board, and they make the decisions and will provide us with guidance. So I think that what would be helpful in this situation is to if there is any advice or guidance that you have for DOFA staff to move it forward, that would be helpful, especially regarding a planting location for the additional cuttings. We would hate to have to carry them over the dry season in the nursery, and yeah, to move that forward.
Dave had to step off this meeting, but he suggested to me that DOFA staff should work with SWCA to reach an agreement and then take it to the ESRC for approval. But I agree, if we could get input from the ESRC as to locations, that would definitely help us to work with SWCA on this.
And I think as an ESRC member, making sure there's clarity on the procedural actions that were needed to happen, apparently quite a while ago, to go in front of the board, which essentially sounds like an amendment to the HCP. So we as ESRC members know the actual criteria that we're supposed to be looking at.
Agreed, Lisa.
I just want
Yes.
to wait here, since I'm, I think, the only botanist on ESRC. I have full confidence in Matt and Susan. They are amazing botanists and with immense knowledge. So I think they have the knowledge that they need to make these decisions. And I find it hard to believe I would go against something that they would recommend.
I am also a botanist. And,
Hey, right on, Lyle. There's two of us.
and
And I spent years working in dry forest on Hawaii.
All right. Okay.
So,
yeah.
Okay.
So,
My opinion of DOFA botanist still stands, though.
oh yeah, I'm not gonna go there. Matt's great, no question, and so is the other DOFA botanist. But you know, mature plants are plants that flower and set seed. So I mean, you know, I've done a lot of work on plants looking at the relationship between size and reproductive output. You know, and certainly there is a relationship there for many species. I'm not so sure whether 6 inches does it for this particular species, and we can kind of defer to Matt on that as well. But I certainly would be concerned about counting a 6-inch plant as a mature plant. But there's no question that there have been mature plants produced there from the offspring. But I'll let them take a crack at it. I just am very leery of dropping one criterion or two criterion in this case, going back to some of the earlier discussions, and assuming that the other three fully captures what's needed. And you know, in one of your reports, if I go back to the one from 2017, you know, you talk about, you know, one of the intents was to produce a, to quote what you put in there, capturing the ultimate goal of the HCP to ensure the species becomes established at the mitigation site and has a stable and viable self-producing population. So I want to make sure that that's what you're looking at, you know, and not overly tearing apart each of the individual words on the remaining three criteria.
Yeah, I agree. I also don't want to, on the flip side, I don't want to expand the scope of what's intended with this HCP to be too broad and too broadly interpreted. At some point, you know, the well does dry up, and we are talking, just to put things back into perspective and bring some context. We're talking about a take request of 3 individuals out of a industrial park. And Loyal, I know that you every time we talk about this, highlight that this is at some point in time was a mitigation site. You know, I think we all agree that by the time this project was proposed, it was the only small site that may have been left in as a little crater, basically, in that area, left undeveloped, that had already been slated for development. And I don't think that we can hold that against the current permittee, since what they did was purchase the site and inherited the ITL that came with it. But just to put into perspective, what we're mitigating for.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be unnecessarily annoying. But that site, was set aside as, as a location for this species. And it has an original substrate. The area around it was all graded, and it wasn't a depression. And I realized that maybe the best use of that site is to go ahead and develop it because it was only about an acre, maybe a little less than that. So I'm not complaining about that, but the reality is, the intent was to produce a self-sustaining population at another location. I don't see where that has happened. And if we can find a way to get it to where it happens at that site, great. If it needs to go to another site, that's the way it's got to be. But, I think one of the things that this points to, is what the ESRC later needs to figure out whether or not it wants to do these sorts of projects where we do the mitigation after the fact, or whether we just say, no, you got to get that done before you go ahead and take the existing population out. So, I do have a concern because I have not seen these projects be very successful. And I would like this one to be successful. And I think it's kind of close, but it's not there yet.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the intent there. I do want to separate a broader intent from how that intent is measured, which is measured by the success criteria, which is why we're talking about the success criteria. I don't think anyone would enter an agreement that's based on establishing a self-sustaining population as a specific success criterion, which is why it isn't. So I want to make that clear. I would like to continue talking about the success criteria rather than an overarching goal.
And I think we need to do both.
May I just say that as a resident of Hawaii and a representative of the owner, that I do agree that your desire to have a self-sustaining population is a wonderful idea, but I cannot afford to continue to manage that for the rest of my life. And so we need to have some delineation as to when success has been met. And that's what I'm asking you for.
And that's reasonable.
Thank you.
Not to inadvertently bring this to a close, but what I'm hearing is that there's going to be some recommendations potentially from ESRC to DOFA staff and continued coordination with YEP and team on success criteria. That'll happen internally. And then if DOFA is ready to put it back to ESRC for a decision, it'll go on a future agenda.
Yeah, I agree. You kind of beat me to the punch. I was going to see if it was time to bring this to a close. Yeah, I agree with that approach.
Okay, appreciate that. Just one thought, time is of the essence. I mean, as we continue to talk about it, there either will or will not be maintenance ongoing, which, I think we have to keep in mind too, that that now has to have a goal. We are beyond year 5 mentioned specifically in the HCP, so would appreciate that.
Yeah, one question I asked earlier in terms of the commitment from the Fish and Wildlife Service in terms of maintaining the site and so forth. Have they been involved in this project at all, other than just permitting it happening? Are they ready to take the baton and move it on and keep this population going? I mean, that's part of what I was looking for in terms of that commitment.
Yeah, that's between DOFA and Fish and Wildlife Service.
Jim, I can't speak for
but they're aware,
right? But they're certainly aware of this, and they know that that this is their responsibility at the end of the project. Refuges, as do most land managers, always have issues with staffing and capacity and all of that kind of stuff, but they understand their obligations here and they have been involved.
And they're aware at a fine scale too. When our client goes out for any kind of activity on site, there's notification to the refuge staff. So even at a fine scale, they're aware. That helps.
This is Matt, and DOFA is also working with this species as one of our endangered species on Oahu, and will continue to help with the monitoring of the site. We did receive monitoring information from Fish and Wildlife recently from the refuge. So they are tracking the rare species at the site and the overall health of the habitat and other threats that are present around these locations.
Okay, thanks. Well, then we'll follow up with DOFA staff shortly after this meeting.
Sounds good. Yeah. Okay, unless there's any other input, do we want to take a 5-minute break before we come back for the next presentation?
That'd be good. Thanks, Yap. Appreciate your input and your dedication to this project.
All right, thanks, Tim.
Could I ask one question? Is there any expectation of timing on all of this?
I can't answer that question immediately, I'm afraid.
Well, we have 100 plants that are in the nursery, so.
Right. Okay, Matt, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I appreciate that need to get them out. Are they at planting size? We would need to discuss with Taylor what the life expectancy on the bench is. We'd have to coordinate with refuges to get access and permission to plant at the site, and also consider other options for any other alternate planting sites. So yeah, I look forward to getting an email from you to initiate those conversations. And certainly Susan and I will be there to discuss options and get recommendations back to you. It would be helpful to get just those details on the plants. How big are they? What size pots? And how full are the root balls in the pots? Thanks.
And
Awesome, thank you.
how many plants are out there right now in the ground at the site? Does anybody know for sure?
I can't tell you for sure right now.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry,
I'll be in
and
touch.
just one more thing. What is the status of the watering at the site? I think that's pretty important. Last time we were there, all of these seedlings, many of which were smaller than 6 inches, were being watered. So maybe some coordination with whoever is doing that horticultural work would also be needed.
Yes, that sounds good. Yeah, there's been no watering since November. Watering was aimed or should have been aimed at the outplants, since they were planted as we discussed in the middle of the year. Yeah, in the meantime, seedlings, as was reported, were benefiting from some of that water as well, but no irrigation since November. But we'll coordinate on that. I appreciate it.
All right. With that, is now 10:24. Should we come back at 10:30?
Okay.
Okay. Oh, and I just want to say thank you. Yep.
All right. Thanks, Paul.
Yep.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I'd like to say thank you as well.
You too. Thank you.
You, Betsy.
Hey, Susan, are you on right now? Can you hear me? Ah, very good. Okay. I've given you, you're now co-host, so you can start sharing. We'll begin shortly when everybody kind of pops back in.
Okay. Let me make sure I know how to do this.
Is that a mature Abutilon behind you?
Yes, it is.
And Kavika, FYI, I dabble in botany too, you know.
Right, but you
Just
have
a little.
but you have a PhD in botany.
All right, I think we're maybe hopefully safe to begin the next presentation.
Okay. You guys always make me really nervous here, but
Oh,
you know.
gosh, sorry, Susan. Don't be nervous.
So it's nothing that you haven't heard before, but I do appreciate Paul sending out this direction for the slides because I think it makes it really easy to follow the same train of thought for every presentation. So we're talking about the HCP for the Abutilon menziesii, specifically at the Kapolei area. We are past the timeline for this project. The project background is that the ITL was issued in 2005 until July of 2021, which so it is now expired. And there have been no amendments. I'll just keep moving on. Here is a map of the project area. In green are wild sites. And so this, with my mouse, I hope you can see that. This is the site we're talking about, the of a Kapolei project area. And later on, this Lualualei site was discovered after this was, these plants were found in the late 90s, I believe that they were discovered. And then all of these other yellow triangles or diamonds are the different mitigation sites.
What are the green and gray areas on that map?
Sorry. Green is state, either state parks or state forest reserve or NARS. And then the grays are military lands. So a summary of take, the ITL covered any take of Abutilon within the 1,300 acre project area. To date, I don't know, the project's been going on so long, I don't know exactly how many plants were bulldozed, but it was somewhere between 65 and 80. To create, majority of them were within the north-south road area. Some of them were dug up and planted in the CRA, and I don't believe all of them survived. So just, this is something, I've shown all these slides before, so forgive me, but yeah, this is from the original HCP. We have the short-term success criteria, which were partially met, and the long-term success criteria, which were also partially met. And then together with the overall success criteria has not been met. Do you want me to go over all of them specifically? Maybe it's a good review, or you don't need to, Jim.
Sorry, I was doing something.
I thought I saw you shake your head.
I don't think you need to go through them unless anybody else wants clarification.
Yeah, all of this has been discussed previously over the last several years, but if anyone wants me to go over it, let me know. But I'll just keep moving on. We can go back to this slide because it has more specifics. This is Paul's title, Adaptive Management and Agency Coordination. Our HCP funds ran out prior to the deadline of the HCP and the ITL. So they were expired in December of 2019, at which time we let our employee go from this project. The HCP office at DOFA and DOFA staff on the project had reached out to the ITL partners at that time, and previous, and we got very little response or interest. And a proposal at that time and subsequent meetings, we proposed to extend the ITL with a modification to the success criteria, utilizing adaptive management. I think I presented on that last time. We also reached out through the HCP office with some of that idea, and did not get any, I guess there was a response, but there was no decision made. And so currently we are, the CRA is there, and the other sites, they're not being maintained as they were during the time when we had funding specific to the project. They're all fire threatened because of the habitats that the species lives in. And I also apologize, there are no year and status updates because there have been no funds. So the last report that was submitted, which was last year's, I didn't have any staff for this project, and I pulled off PEP staff in order to get out to monitor the plants in order to create the report that was submitted last time. And I didn't want to do that this year because we have other things to accomplish with those staff hours. It takes, more than 10 person days to do all the monitoring in order to produce a report. So I thought their time was better spent other places. But I think that the numbers that are in the table following are probably still close. So these are the numbers that were reported on last time at the various sites. The HCP calls the mitigation sites wild sites. So I'm calling them outplanted, or we usually call them reintroductions or something. So they're not technically wild, in place plants, but this was the status of them as of last year. And then the other sites here, I've tried to highlight that are, Cocoa Head is a living collection. Hamakua Marsh is a trial, and then the Ewa Villages golf area adjacent to the CRA is watered, and so it's considered a living collection. Let's see. I'm just going to keep on going through the slides. Future plans. This is Paul's title too, and I didn't know what to write, so I just put out some photos. The one on the left is the Cocoa Head living collection, which houses, nearly every single wild clone. So they are of original Kapolei wild stock, and there's close to 80 something individuals in that area here represented. They're all a little bit overgrown, but they have tags, and so we can track the founders in that location. And then on the right is a picture from Mokuake'au of a large plant that had been outplanted. And I just thought that was a good shot because the last two sites, the Wainaikai and the Mokuake'au, were added, in the last few years just to try something new. And these plants have not been watered. These are, regular reintroduction style, just throw them out there with like initial watering or two, and then they survive on their own, and they seem to be thriving and fruiting. And anyway, that is, I guess, the end. I have other slides just to show you what the other sites look like, but we've talked about it before. So I think the main conclusion is that the ITL and the HCP are POW. So I'm not sure if the HCP staff wanted to, Paul wanted to take over, and maybe if there's a discussion time, or if I know Daryl's online, if he wanted to maybe speak for DHHL, because DHHL is the only partner that is still interested in seeing what happens with this project because of the CRA status.
Okay, thanks, Susan. Yeah, I don't have anything to really add with. I have to work with the folks at DHHL because I know that they're, like you said, they're interested in getting this going again. So I'll have to, with you and others, touch bases in the near future.
I've got a couple questions. Can you go back to maybe just one slide back first? That one there, Cocoa Head is on the left, is that right?
Yeah. And that is irrigated because it's living.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say. So that is, it's obviously irrigated and so forth. And one of the things that was brought up, I know, I mean, this was, I think, the first HCP the committee did, and I was on the committee at that time, believe it or not. But one of the concerns that was brought up about Cocoa Head was the potential for hybridization with another species of butylon that's out in that area. And if that's still the case, I'm not sure. But so a couple questions on that one is one of the things that we really felt was if any propagation material came from Cocoa Head, it would only be through cuttings and not through seeds, just because of that concern for hybridization. Is that still the case? Is it still a concern?
I have never seen any hybrids. I have never talked to anybody who has known of any hybrids. All the material that was used for all of the mitigation outplanting sites were clones. So they were taken from this area as air layers.
Okay, great. Yeah, and this is a valuable site in terms of that being at least a propagation potential site too. But it's not a wild site, obviously. And then if you can go back to your other slide showing the populations, that's very useful. I realize it's a year out of date, but so the one with the table that shows the different populations in different areas.
I don't know why my computer is really slow. Hold on a second.
Well, in any case, my point being is I'm excited about the two new sites over on the Waianae side there, the Waianae Kai and the Kea'au. I think those really have a lot of potential, and glad to see that's being brought in, and also the fact that at least certainly the Kea'au, I don't know about the Waianae, yeah, the Kea'au. I'm not sure about the Waianae Kai one. But again, it seems like it's within a matrix of other native species and so forth, and I think that's really the kind of approach that's really needed there. And I will point out that both of those sites are within at least our modeled range of historic range of that species. So I really applaud that as opposed to some of the concerns that we brought up about other places such as Hamakua Marsh and so forth. They're good sites for, again, similar to Cocoa Head, but I wouldn't consider them as having really that high potential for what we would consider to be a wild site in the long run, at least the intent from the beginning.
Yeah, I agree that we knew the money was going to run out, and we were just we wanted to try and incorporate it into whatever work DOFA was already doing. And that was the main focus of the three sites, Makua Kea'au, Waianae Kai, and Hamakua Marsh. We had interest in the Hamakua Marsh staff and volunteers there to add that plant there, and as well. And then the Makua Kea'au and Waianae Kai site, like I said, they're more of like a dry forest restoration project. And that's why they're incorporated there, and those two definitely have had like some tough love. They don't get irrigated at all, and you might get like 2 waterings in, and they're looking really good. Yeah, I mean, the plant that is behind me looks like in its full glory, but normally throughout the year they do not look this good. They're kind of sticks, but they're hardy, so that's what they're supposed to look like.
Sounds good. And then as far as the CRA, I mean, again, I've always expressed real support for trying to maintain that, because that was a wild site, a natural wild site, and to be blunt, I've been very disappointed and frustrated by really the kind of management that has or hasn't been done out in that area. And I remember about 5 years ago we had a site visit with some other horticultural experts who actually made some really good suggestions in terms of changing management in habitats like that, and that area in particular. But it doesn't seem like that's going on. And so my concern is really what is the fate of what is the future of the CRA? And I know that there's question in terms of what its status is or would be or will be. But I guess the question is right now, is there any from anybody? And I do appreciate DOFA, continuing on the work that they have done as much as they could. But if the CRA basically is just left to wither away, at some point the last of the plants will die because there's no good ecological management going on out there, and then what happens to it relative to its status. So I guess those are some things that I do bring up as a concern, because I still think that is a potentially very important site.
Yeah, I agree. There were quite a few common natives additionally put in there that look pretty good. DOFA staff is utilizing all the ali'i for, building up restoration stock post-fire. So they collected like almost 1 million seeds there the other year. But yeah, it is a large area, and to not have a dedicated staff currently, it's just no way. It's also really highly fire threatened. There's a lot of just crazy weird stuff going on. It's like homeless and kids and burned vehicles and stuff like that. So I'm sure the community would like something to be done as well. It's just I manage 2 humans and a kupu intern, and we are focused on really rare things. And it would be really helpful to have dedicated funding and staff for a project like this. And I don't think that it's actually in the DOFA purview to continue the HCP for a different party. That's where it just got a little bit confounded with DOFA being the HCP office being the regulator, and then originally contracted to do this work. So I believe DHHL is interested in starting another HCP. I've heard some talk about it. I'm not sure if Daryl wanted to speak on that.
Good morning, Daryl Ng from Hawaiian Homelands, Land Development Division. I guess we would be interested in some form of HCP and taking license. From our perspective, of course, we want the best for the plants, don't want them to die out. But at the same time, that particular parcel, has been mentioned, the danger of fire is very real. We had a small brush fire about a year ago, right outside our residential development. And of course, that existing HCP is right next to the rail station. So once that gets on board, of course, the chance for somebody smoking and flicking a cigarette butt off the wrong direction is very real, very possible. So we would like some kind of solution. As well, we do have another 150 or so acres of land that we're already planning for residential uses, and there hasn't been a survey recently, so we don't know if there are any new plants that somehow got a seed blown over or whatever, and we may end up having to move it to do our residential developments. So yes, we are definitely interested in some sort of new or modified HCP, as well as a taking license to go along with that.
Well, that's exciting to hear, and I'm hoping that DHHL will be working with the staff and potentially the ESRC to help move that forward. Fire is a problem in that entire habitat that Abutilon is found in, and so that's always a challenge, no matter what. And other species such as Acranthes and other ones that we haven't talked about today. Incorporating a fire mitigation or fire management plan, I think, is really essential part of any kind of a management plan as we move forward with this. But it's exciting to hear that there is a potential, at least in trying to move from where we are at this point.
I just wanted to say that I thought, this HCP didn't meet all the success criteria, but it wasn't failure by any means. A lot of good was done. I think we learned a lot about the HCP process and what are maybe realistic goals per year or per project in the like a midterm and a final timeline for goals. I think that there could be like a smaller HCP, you know, to follow this. I mean, not my Kuliana, it would have to be Paul to, you know, organize the writing and all of that. I'm sure I'll comment heavily as to what I think needs to be done, but yeah, I just wanted to say I don't think that this was a failure at all. Some of the success criteria I think were hard to meet, but also some of them could easily have been met with just a little more input and direction, and maybe even with an extended ITL and just a little bit more input from the partners. But I also wanted to say, like, I know the budget seems high when you look at it overall, but I think that it was probably underfunded in a lot of ways over the years, because yeah, $1.2 million seems like a lot, but it's not when you divide it up by the amount of time that was spent on here. It's, you know, it's less than $60,000 a year, and there's a vehicle, and there's overhead, and there's fringe, and there's gas and equipment, and a greenhouse was built. So I don't believe that the money was misspent at all. I just could have made a little more adaptive management earlier on, maybe. But yeah, it was overall a good project.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think we have learned a lot from it. I think, you know, one of the real positive pieces was the genetic storage that was initiated right at the beginning. And I think that was really a key part to the project. And obviously that's something that we want to make sure for other similar things. I think the other lesson learned is you know, when this was essentially the first HCP that the ESRC worked on. And we've learned a lot about things at that point in terms of hopefully we have learned in terms of how to craft success criteria and goals and things such as that would be hopefully incorporated into you know, plans, you know, such as this. So I think we have learned a lot out of it. And as Loyal said about when we were talking about the previous project, this is a hard habitat to work in, and we were dealing with so many different issues. But there have been some successes in managing native species restoration in this type of habitat. And you know, one of the best examples I know is certainly over on Molokai with the work that Bugartis has been doing with Molokai Land Trust. So I think there are ways forward on it that would have an ecological good story ending. And so I'm looking forward to seeing this move forward, hopefully with a new life.
Yeah, me too.
Sounds good. And like I mentioned, we can start email correspondence again with Daryl. I think I missed a meeting a few weeks back, and I sincerely apologize for that. So if we can continue it on, we can get another HCP initiated.
So just to clarify though, at this point, what is the status of the CR, and is there any are there any short timelines that need to be addressed?
CRA is still, I guess we have a DOFA lock on the gate. I'm not sure who else has the lock on the gate, but we don't go in there too often. It happens to have like 2, I think, unique genetic lines that need to be cloned in order to save them. And yeah, we need to get to that. It's just on our to-do list. Otherwise, I mean, the whole place was, you know, heavily cared for by Greg Metzger. He definitely mowed and weed whacked and sprayed and stuff, and we haven't been doing any of that. Especially, there's supposed to be like a fire break around the whole thing, and part of the HCP funds definitely we're covering that. So yeah, I guess there are at last count 29 plants still there. Some of them are outplants, some of them are wild, and I would have to dig through the data to find out how many of each are what. But yeah, there's large plants in there still.
Yeah, and those are all matures, but you're not seeing any recruitment right now.
We have not. I have not monitored that closely to see recruitment. And I think in the past year's reports, it's hard to have recruitment with this species. I think it does go on maybe like a 10-year cycle where it's like you have enough rain this year or something. And maybe apart from the Honolulu Reserve, it's hard to find a recruit. It really needs like the right season. And it is a harsh environment. You know, the plants might sit tight for many years before they have a flush that is enough to, you know, a bunch of seedlings come up from the ground being wet enough. Additionally, one thing that maybe wasn't covered in the success criteria, which it seems like it could possibly be a good one, is that the plants get larger and larger based on these runners. And, you know, an initial outplant or a 2-year outplant without irrigation is much smaller than a plant that's been established for many years. They can, you know, span over 1.5 meter squared area for one individual. And, you know, maybe that could be part of like just measuring individuals and, you know, their longevity and the amount of propagules that they would contribute to the next generation is much larger, I think, than something that's much smaller. So it just, you know, just ideas for the next round of criteria.
Yeah, and since you have this table up here too, I mean, 2 other sites that we brought up and but I would encourage, you know, at least exploring would be on the leeward side of Makapu'u Point. That seems to be a habitat that would fit into at least some of the criteria. It's part of our modeled historic range. And another area would be some of the talus slopes in areas above on the lee side, on the windward side of Kaena Point. You know, as you well from Mokalea. I mean, those are 2 potential areas. What was tried before at Kaena Point was more down in the flats, and I think the plants were really more affected by the ehukai than anything else, and that was part of the problem, as well as the fire that burned the plants and the greenhouse too eventually. But the talus slopes, I think, have got some potential too. So, you know, I think there are some sites that have some possibility for establishment, and also in both those cases, they've got habitat that is got rougher terrain that's not quite overwhelmed by guinea grass and buffalo grass and things like that. So anyway, there's some possibilities that I think would be worthwhile exploring.
Well, that's all I have.
Thanks, Susan. Go ahead.
Sorry, Susan, this is Lisa. I was just so I make sure I heard correctly, there's 2 individuals at the CRA site that do not have genetic representation anywhere else?
Yeah, I think that's the number. I think it's 2.
Okay. And you're hoping to get to that sometime soon?
Yeah, I mean, you know, my staff, we manage, you know, over 70 species on this island, and we prioritize based on rarity and need. And
yeah, my only concern would be if this fire comes through
yeah, for sure.
So if you need any volunteers on the ground to come help, let us know.
Is there anything else from the ESRC? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Thank you, Susan. The next presentation will be.
Thanks, Susan.
So up next will be Reggie Davis, Hokuala. I'm going to give you co-host rights. All right, Reggie, you're ready anytime.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry.
No worries. Just really share your screen, your co-host.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I think everybody that's on the committee has been privy to this project and this HCP for many years. Just to remind folks, this is a bit of an odd HCP in that it started as an MOU between the then owners, Kauai Lagoons, and with Fish and Wildlife Service. And the goal of that was to restore habitat, enhance habitat, and make as many nene as we could. I forget how many birds we started with, but essentially in the next 6 years, we went from about 30 birds to 700. That obviously created a lot of problems. And these permits were issued in April and November of 2012. And it's a 30-year permit. It is a 625-acre site. The property sold in 2016, in the beginning of 16, and the permits were transferred in December to the new owners. Basically, our authorized take is on the slide before you. And
Reggie, you're not sharing your screen.
sorry?
You're not sharing your screen?
Oh, hang on. What am I doing wrong? How do I do that?
There should be a little box down at the bottom, I believe, that says share screen. That's how it looks for me.
I apologize.
No worries. There we go.
Okay, I just run. So this is what it looks like. This was the information that I already shared. This is the authorized take under this permit, which we're now going into our 9th year. And this is the take since the permit inception through the end of this reporting period. Obviously, the one issue that continues to be a poser are the gallonal take numbers. As we have 40 mortalities and 30 non-lethal in our permit. So we are definitely heading into the zone of not quite sure what we're going to do. I'll get back to that near the end because conditions on the resort have changed significantly. And there's a very active hazing going on the site. So I'll come back to this at the end when I talk about what's going on the property. So this season we had 6 animals taken, 3 coots, or rather, yeah, a duck, 2 coots, and 3 gallinals. As usual, vehicle hits were the predominant cause of death in gallinals. And we had 1 Hawaiian duck that also got hit. So it was a busy year on the property this year. We're still, and right now we're still in the nesting season. So we'll talk about that later. So last year we had 18 nests. The first one was found on September the 18th and the last found on January the 18th. The interesting thing is we're seeing it's almost the exact pattern we had the year before, and it's almost the exact set of dates that we're experiencing this current season. So we had 51 eggs laid and 43 hatched, which hatch rate of 84, and hatchling survival of 49%, which is down from previous years. But I think that's a reflection partially on the hazing and the removal of about 650 some birds by the state to other islands. So the birds on the property are no longer a full age class flock. And these guys need to learn how to do it by example. And if you don't have alpha birds in there, first and second time nesters sometimes forget to take care of their kids. And those more dominant birds come in and steal their kids. And that basically is not happening anymore because the majority of our birds are very young. So that's sort of the breakdown. Compared to a standard wild flock, these numbers are extremely high, positively. But we did have a fair number of failed eggs. And essentially, we analyzed these. And so we had 2, 3, 4, 5. We had 7 eggs that were infertile, which hard to say exactly what happened there, whether or not these were young birds that never quite figured out what they were doing, or if we're facing some genetic issues. The second egg that was only 24 grams, that is an old pair, and they throw walnut egg every year. So they've been doing this for a long time. When we were really managing the flock, we kept them around because when we had to abandon eggs, we would just replace the eggs and put them under her, and she was a great sitter. But she's still there, but she's not producing any viable offspring. And then, of course, we had one fully developed embryo, who knows why it died, and one egg that was dropped in the middle of the golf course. We do water bird counts, and our permit says that we're supposed to do it 12 times a year. And we usually do it, we did it this year, same as last season, 91 counts. There's quite a variety of birds on the property. Obviously, some of these birds are migratory, and so the low numbers just when they're not in Hawaii. Overall, our numbers of resident birds have definitely been dropping over time, likely due to the active hazing with 3 dogs, but who knows? As I think the committee remembers, we set up a pond we used to have 2 18-hole golf courses, and when the new owners came in, golf courses aren't making money, and they decided to close one golf course, and it's basically turned that into a walking, running, and jogging facility with an organic farm that actually produces all the vegetables for the restaurant on the property. And so have had a fair amount of nesting on the property. We had 30 gallinule nests, 4 coot nests, and as folks may remember, we never had coots nesting on the property until about 4 years ago. So that's a little unusual. They're doing well. And Hawaiian Ducks, we had 12 nests. Those are very cyclical. Some years we have a lot of nests, some years we don't. We had no black-necked stilt nests this year. We get them every now and again since we have set up this what we call our baby nursery. We have a very active trapping and predator removal program. We trap 365 days of the year. Our permit says we're to have 10 traps. We run 63. We removed 18 cats, 1 dog, 27 pigs, and 996 feral chickens. Well, Jim's laughing because this number actually is quite low compared to some of the previous years where sometimes we were up well over 3,000. So maybe we're beginning to have an effect. But just like every place else on Kauai, we got a lot of chickens.
But do you mind if I ask a couple of questions, or would you prefer that I wait till the end?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
I'm here to give you information, so ask away.
So two things on this, both having to do with predation, I guess, and maybe I'll tell you both questions and you can answer them as you wish. On a couple of slides ago, you showed 0 predation events, which I've never seen, 0 nest predation events. With chicks, it might just be we didn't detect it, but the chicks just disappear. No egg predation is like phenomenal. I was wondering if you could just speak to how you think you got it to those levels where you had 0, and is that no eggs were taken from the nest, or there were no nests that completely failed due to predation? Because I know some people, like if one egg disappears, they're not going to notice. It's only if a total nest fail occurred that they'll say it was predated. So my first question has to do with around that predation and that 0 value, which I was just floored by. The second one is I've never seen someone report on chickens removed, but for example, in Kailua on Oahu, I often think about how those chickens must be popping up the mongoose and cat populations and stuff, and what difference do you think it makes that you're removing the chickens? Do you think that has an impact on keeping the other predator numbers low? So anyways, I'll let you answer that as you wish.
Okay, so let me answer your nest predation. The 0 number reflects only the nene nest. We don't actively seek out every single one of the water bird nests. Most of those are actually in situations where it would be a hard place for predators to get, given our trapping efforts. We know every single nene nest on the property. They're checked daily. We have had like 1 broken egg, but you get a broken egg in a nene nest every now and again, and unless you find something that's got tooth marks in it, it's hard to say. I guess the other thing is that we have biostaff 365 days of the year. So there's a lot of activity going on. And the other thing is that we have wildlife services on the property, hazing something like, I want to say 12 hours a day with 3 dogs. So there's a lot of activity on the property. So the predation that we have tended to see on the property has been from barn owls. And that tends to be mainly ducks. We haven't had any in a few years, but on this property, Hawaiian ducks haven't quite figured out that they're supposed to be close to the water. So it's not uncommon to have a duck, I want to say 500 meters away from a place that it can go run and hide, and they're just wandering around these giant fields at sundown, and they're kind of don't stand much of a chance. We have very strict rules on dogs on property. They have to be on leashes. If you walk a dog on the property with no leash, you're 86. You'll never be allowed to come back and use the walking paths. But we also have 3 active border collies working the property every day, 7 days a week.
Maybe I'll give a more pointed question. Do you think that essentially, I know you don't have mongoose on that island, so
we have caught them.
Oh, really? Okay.
Not many, but yeah,
Terrifying.
We're right close to the harbor.
Got it. Michelle.
If I recall correctly, that one that we caught, or that was caught on Kauai a couple of years ago, was actually on Kauai lagoons, right, Reggie?
That is correct. Yeah. And we reached out to everybody, including NBTS and everybody else, or NTBG, and we grabbed every spare trap we could find on the island. We had, I don't know what we had, 158 traps out within 24 hours. Really mounted quite an effort, but did get that one, which was, really kind of a good deal.
Yeah, I appreciate you speaking to this. I think my main point is, across projects, I'm very interested in how do we do enough predator control to actually get to great levels of success, so we can achieve recovery. And it looks like at this site, at least, you're getting there. So I'm just interested in how you think you got there. What's enough,
It's a massive, I mean, we've been doing this since 2005. It's also a golf course. It's a very high-end resort. There are no pets. It's sort of the ideal situation if you want to control predators, I think. I think you go to many other properties and you're not so blessed. And if you were in wetlands that are not, they have thick vegetation around them and other things, it's a major challenge, as we all know. But this, anytime anybody wants to come over and see it, we'll certainly be happy to show people around. It's been effective, but it's probably also one of the easier sites to do that kind of work in, I think. We also have an airport immediately next door where they have wildlife services working 24/7, 24 hours a day. So it is not the best place to be running around if you happen to be a dog or a cat or something like that. And we don't have mongoose in any numbers yet. So if we did, I think we would be seeing a very, very different results.
Okay, so large spaces, continuous across property lines with control, side-by-side controlled parcels, maybe helps. Okay, that's super useful. Thank you so much for answering my questions. I appreciate it.
And Melissa, I would also echo the longevity of the application.
We've been doing this since 2005.
Yeah, and really heavy predator control. Reg, one other question on predators. Elsewhere, cattle egrets have been suspected or tabbed as being predators on nanny chicks and so forth. Are you seeing any interaction with cattle egrets on any of the birds?
No, we're not. I mean, our problem there tends to be black-crowned night herons, as just the same problem I have in Kona at the wastewater treatment plant. I'm losing all my stilt eggs at that facility to black-crowned night herons, which they do quite a job. And on that site, we had 39 stilts finally grab one of the black-crowned night herons and drowned it. But those black-crowned night herons got 22 eggs in 2 days. So yeah, they're really and it's a real tough problem because obviously they're an indigenous species. They're protected under the MBTA. So it's one of these, it's sort of the same situation we had with Alala and Eo, where it's awful difficult to have them both. So chickens, Jim?
I just said life in the food chain.
Yeah. So Melissa, on the chickens, I started removing the chickens because I was getting with the sheer densities that we have 600 acres and we were probably having 5,000 chickens on the property. And a lot of the chickens were showing signs of pox. And I was very concerned that we had 750 nanny at that time. So I got very concerned that there was a possibility of gallinaceous diseases being spread to our water birds and nene. The side benefit with it was, of course, it made the gardener's job a lot easier because the chickens destroy all the plantings. And also the sheer noise of those roosters is pretty staggering. And when you're spending $5 million for a condo, you don't really need alarm clocks that go off every 10 minutes throughout the entire night.
Thank you again. That's helpful. And people have tried to get me to work on chickens on research, and I just spread too many directions right now. But I think it's an important thing to note the difference it makes potentially when someone's put in an effort like this. And so my interest was piqued since I haven't seen someone report on that before. So thank you so much.
Well, just to add the numbers together, we've probably taken 15,000 chickens off that property, which is a ridiculous number. Thank you. Okay, so basically what happened is when our nanny numbers got to be really high, the governor issued a proclamation, and essentially the state got a pile of money and hired DOFA to move the birds, the bulk of our birds, to Maui and to the Big Island. They were released in fairly high altitude areas, and as expected, the minute that they grew back in their flight feathers, they immediately beelined it down to the coast, golf courses, airports, and places that they preferred. So it's created quite an interesting situation on other islands. And we even had birds flying inter-island. We had a pair that showed up on Oahu, then showed up on Lanai, and then ended up back on Oahu. So no good deed goes unpunished. So following that, Wildlife Services got permits to haze birds on the property, and they used border collies, and they're pretty amazing animals to watch work. So they started hazing on the end of June 19, and they're still hazing today. And like I said, they haze 7 days a week from about, I want to say it's about an hour and a half before sunup to a couple hours after sundown. Hazing is conducted on a daily basis. It has been effective in moving many birds, but what it's also done is it's moved a lot of birds into areas which are more dangerous because they have roads. The thing that is interesting is I kind of thought that this might happen, is that to date this season, and we found another nest yesterday, we've actually had 23 nests this year, 18 last year, 15 the year before. And as of today, we actually have 4 active nests with birds sitting on eggs. So these birds, and 9 of the 23 pairs nested last year, they've gotten pretty savvy about these birds, and they're also putting their nests in areas that they're hiding them incredibly well, and they're in very dense vegetation. And we just found this one today that was well along, and we never saw it. So that's these birds are very smart. They're quite adaptable, quite plastic. And yesterday, which I guess was the 3rd, Wildlife Services sat tagged another 10 birds on the property. All of them adults. So that's the prepared presentation. So obviously I'm happy to take any questions. I think everybody knows this project pretty well.
Does the state have any other plans to move more nanny out of that site?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not that I'm aware of, Jim.
And what's happening, obviously, Jim, is that what we're getting is a lot of much younger birds that weren't originally from this site, that are coming in from surrounding areas. And a lot of them are not banded, which we no longer know who a lot of these guys are. Because as you remember, when we were actively managing them, I think it was 98% of them were banded. So we knew who was who and who produced what and how many eggs, and sort of the paint and place life of these nene who live a pretty complicated life.
Hey, Reg, I had to step away for a second. Or Nesh or Hate.
Sorry, you're breaking up.
Sorry, light attraction for seabirds, was there this past year?
No. We We did have 2 wedgies. We actively searched, and we actually found one of them in a rain gutter on a roof, if you can believe that. But yeah, we haven't had a nest in a while.
Okay, thank you.
And for those that don't know, there's a wedge-tail shearwater colony right at the end of Nanini Point, which is at the end of the runway and directly southwest of us, or southeast of us.
Sorry, David or Reggie, just to follow up with you, are you done presenting on all of the different projects you work on? You mostly presented on the water bird stuff, but you're also working on a number of the projects for which we had the lights visit, right before the year before the shutdown. And so we're far enough into those. I think we would see some of the progress maybe from the trainings in searches and the light shielding and the different things like that. Is that report taking place here or in a separate section of today's annual reporting?
It's basically in our annual report. We've been training every single person that works on the property now since 2005. We usually do search for efficiency trials. It's not required in our permits. We do an annual lighting review. For those of you that have not been to the property, it is incredibly dark. And when Timbers bought it and they built this new building, which is their upscale condos there that you can see in this last slide, I did a lighting review on it. And before I'd even completed my report with suggestions for revisions, their higher ups from Colorado came in and said, this place is way too bright. We want this dim and very romantic. So we really have very little light on the property. All of the street lights, everything are completely shielded, and they have been going way, way, way back. All of our parking lots have almost no lights in them. The lighting where cars are parked, the cars are parked underneath the building in this slide, so there's no exterior parking. The garage is underneath it. And at Kalani Pu'u, which is Marriott Inn Holding, that's the building that was originally built by Marriott. All of their lighting for their fairly small parking lot actually comes from 100% shielded lights.
Sorry, Michelle, was I off in my timing or something? You had
I just want to clarify, Melissa. So the other projects that Reggie does that have all those other project sites that we went and visited, those are the permittees under the Kauai Seabird HCP. So those are different permits, and they're not part of today's review because there's a separate day just for those guys.
Perfect.
Reggie, I assume that you'll be back to share information about all those projects on whatever day that is being planned for. The Kauai Lagoons, sorry, I keep calling it Kauai Lagoons when really it's now changed to Hokuala, but the Hokuala permit is completely separate from the Kauai Seabird HCP. And so that's why it's on today's schedule rather than with the other ones.
You will have the great joy of having to listen to me again because I have quite a few of those other ones as well.
Thank you. Same face, different places. Apologies for my confusing.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
One more question for you, Reggie, on my end. Moorhen take. I was looking back at my notes from this time last year, and it looked like we were getting closer toward the permitted levels of take for Moorhen. Where are we relative to the permitted level, and are we anticipating that we're going to be able to minimize that to the extent that there doesn't need to be an amendment to request additional take?
I guess this has been one that we've been obviously talking to the agencies about since it became an issue. we're basically slightly over half of our take for downhills. So we didn't know what was going to happen when we ended up with the dog hazing or the nene hazing by dogs. And we didn't really know what to expect with the downhills. So I think realistically, we've kind of run out of brilliant ideas to minimize things anymore. I mean, we've tried everything in the book, as those of you that have been on this one for a while know. So I think realistically that, wait to the end of this season and then see where we are with this season. And then I think it may very well be prudent to start working on an amendment. Because there will be additional development on the site. So with additional development in the future, that will mean more people, more cars. So yeah, I think the end of this current season, we should probably have a meeting with the two agencies, and we should probably sit down and talk about what the agencies feel is the appropriate thing to do at that point. I honestly, personally, don't see those levels going down significantly more than they have already. Part of the problem is we have a ridiculous number of gallinals on the property, which is partially our fault because we make so many of them. But yeah, it's I think that's probably something we ought to put on our calendars and start talking the end of June.
The source of take for gallinules is cars and golf balls.
It's predominantly cars. We've had very, very few gallinules hit by golf balls.
And Reggie, is that due to on-site stuff, or is it due to the hazing from Wildlife Services?
Well, I have to say that if you go back to before, when we had the hazing going on, we were still managing to take gallinules with vehicles. So I think it's probably a bit of both, but realistically, I am not extremely confident that unless the gallinule numbers drop, that we're going to be able to do an awful lot more to ensure that a couple of birds a year don't get taken. And we've got 20 years left on this permit, and if we took 2 a year, we're going to be way over our permit. So I think we should be getting ready to gear up and figure out how best to approach this.
Thank you.
And then it sounds like there is the minor amendment still pending on transferring the actual permit and license. Is that still the case?
Yeah, I think it's pretty. I think it's back in your guys' hands. So I think it's at this point it's all but done. Because that's kind of what we want to do. We want to make sure that that was in place before we went to amend the permit, because the owners and everything are different from the original owners of the permit. So that's what that minor amendment is about. I'm assuming that's going to be completed very shortly. We've done everything on our end, I know. And I haven't checked, sorry, to find out where we're at with that. I should have done that and I spaced it.
Is there anything else, input from anybody?
No, thanks, Reg, and it's good to hear the progress on this project, and really a credit to everybody on your project. It's doing the outstanding job of monitoring and management, and especially the predator control. So it sort of sets a standard that we'd like to see in a lot of other places. Really excellent job.
Thank you. Melissa, I need to talk to you later about that, your grad student that was doing the black crown night herring monitoring stuff.
Sure. Yeah, we haven't directly been monitoring black crown night herons specifically, but we have had cameras on nests for quite a while, and specifically went back and reanalyzed the data to look for different predator types, and auku'u are showing up as in the top models for predicting the likelihood of nest predation. Auku'u, mongoose, and cats are the three that seem
Okay,
to.
well, I'll talk to you offline on that because I'm going to implement something at the wastewater treatment plant.
Sure, happy to do so at the extent it's useful.
Okay, thank you all.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Reggie.
Yep.
All right, so with that, I think what I will do is give a very brief presentation on cyanotech. I'm going to bring that up quickly. We have left is cyanotech, the Kamehameha Schools, SHA, and then the Nene SHAs. Namaka Whitehead said she'd be available at noon or after, so I can give a quick review of cyanotech, and we could take a break for a bit if you wanted to before moving on to Namaka to give her a bit more time. But we can decide that when I'm done with cyanotech. I am going to share my screen. Okay, can you folks see this okay? I'm assuming this is visible for you? Okay, cool.
Yes.
Okay, great. So this was provided to me by, I guess, their current contractor, Lance Tonino. I think he's been on this project since the middle of 2020. It's a fairly scant presentation, so I'll probably stay on here and just give you a quick rundown on this slide, I should say. So cyanotech is a 36.42 hectare agricultural facility located at the Hawaiian Ocean Science and Technology Park in the county of Hawaii. Its main purpose is to produce human nutritional products from microalgae. The site previously included a 0.69 hectare dedicated dedicated to Hawaiian stilt nesting habitat as part of cyanotech's conservation plan. The facility currently consists of 70 production runways, comprising approximately 20.2 hectares. I believe the runways are the green elements here. These are long pools of water. I've not been there, so I'm not sure if they're all interconnected or how it works. These production raceways are maintained at approximately 20 centimeters in depth and support a few species of invertebrates that attract and serve as food sources for water birds, including the Hawaiian stilt. In accordance with their HCP, surveys for incidental take of stilts are conducted once per week during the nesting season, which is March through August, and once per month during the non-nesting season, which is September through February. It's my understanding, I'm taking this from information I've read, that this is supplemented by non-target monitoring for injured wildlife that is conducted via daily inspections by staff of the production runways. I believe these inspections are mostly to look for trash or detritus that might be clogging the waterways. There were no mortalities or incidental take recovered from or reported for cyanotech this year from September 20th through August 2021. That would be the survey period that is being reported here. In summary, 6 surveys detected no stilts from September 20th to February 21. 27 surveys conducted in March to August of 2021 detected an average of 14.1 stilts. In total monitoring in FY21 documented 5 nests, 16 eggs, 8 hatchlings, and 3 fledglings, which were documented roughly from September 2020 to August 2021. I'm going to go back to the first slide here. The ITL that was originally provided or given for this project was 13 years from December 2023 to March 2016. They had applied in 2016, or requested, I should say, for renewal of their ITL and HCP with a requested take of 38 stilts for the following 19 years, which was supposed to be 2016 to 2035. While the HCP has been renewed on the federal side, the state still needs to consult with Sinotech for state renewal, which may be different than the federal side. And I'm not quite sure where the 36 years comes in here that he provided. I'm not sure, because that doesn't work out mathematically. So I'm not, maybe that's the entire length of the project from, probably is, I haven't done this, it's probably from 2003 to 2035. That might work out. We also expect Sinotech, or the state expects Sinotech, to continue with the same level of effort and deterrence and monitoring that they had in place under the previous HCP. Sinotech is required to propose a suitable potential mitigation project within 1 year of approval, and they are working on an agreement with the County of Hawaii to provide predator control at, I'm going to mispronounce this, Kilikahe wastewater treatment plant as part of their offsite mitigation. And they are, okay. They are currently working to determine deterrents to keep stilts from visiting and nesting at the project site itself. Again, that's all the information I have on hand.
Yeah, this is a project that's been going on for a long time. It was on early, we visited the site way back when it first was getting started, when they still had that other production pond in production. Excuse me. And it's good to see them continuing on. I think it's going to be useful. Their hazing seems to be very successful. I guess that the question I've got is, as far as the potential predator control mitigation at the wastewater site, is just making sure, if there's any other predator control going on out there. Reggie seems like, his brief mention of it, that he at least visits the site regularly, and noted predation by the auku'u, black-crowned night heron. So we want to make sure that any kind of mitigation actually is going to be producing some results, at least relative to what their take request is.
Okay.
So Jim, I do think that that's a problem, and I'm looking at the information that I've got from our POCs on the federal side. It looks like for Cyanotech, total of 16 eggs this year, 8 hatchlings, and 3 successful fledglings during the breeding season. All of the unsuccessful breeding was likely due to predation, but it doesn't give me a breakdown on what that predation, what the form of that predation is, or what the predator was. For Kealakahe, total of 6 nests with 22 eggs, but all of them failed. All likely due to depredation, all of which is likely auku'u. They do pretty substantial predator control beyond that. They're doing predator control for, I think, rats, mongoose, and cats. But
this is Cyanotech doing it.
This is the Kealakahe wastewater treatment plant.
Oh yeah, but is Cyanotech funding that to do that? Are they already doing it?
They're funding part of it, yeah.
Okay, part of it. Okay.
The county, I think, is funding other parts of it.
Okay, then we get into that parsing question.
But no success.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the challenges is going to be how to successfully control predation by auku'u.
I just want to note, I think it's really easy to blame auku'u because they're there during the day standing in the nest. I mean, even before they'll lay eggs, the auku'u will be sitting there staring at sometimes standing in the middle of the stilt nest. And so it's really easy to blame them. I think they are part of the predator suite of things happening, but the cats show up at night. And so you're not going to see them, but they are egg predators. We do have evidence of them predating eggs. So if you don't have cameras on nests, I would be intent to say Alku'u are the main problem and that there's adequate mammal control, which we can do. Let's make sure that we're confident we're doing the things we do have the ability to do before getting into the territory of how to control a native species, which is a harder question.
Yeah,
Good point.
and
Thanks.
Lisa, that is a point that I've got here from our federal POC saying that they're going to try and get cameras on the nests at Kalikahe wastewater treatment plant to try and get a better sense of what's going on out there. I don't know if there's any plans in place to try and get a better sense of the predation that's going on at Cyanotech.
I do know at the Old A Park next to the wastewater treatment plant, there's a pretty massive feral cat colony that's maintained. So that would be a big seed for predation, I would imagine.
Yeah, and just harkening back probably a decade or so now, USGS actually was involved with potentially setting up a habitat restoration program at the wastewater facility, but not within the wastewater ponds, but in some adjacent ponds that they were going to construct and actually make some habitat. It was something which sounded like a very interesting project, and I got involved in it just very briefly, just to talk about it. But it's got some interesting possibilities since you already have a magnet for birds being there that to potentially enhance that habitat is something else. But again, that may be well beyond the scope of what Cyanotech would be doing. And when I mentioned USGS, it wasn't us USGS, it was USGS mainland waterbird folks and so forth.
I mean, overall, it sounds like this permit, well, sorry, not permit, license. It sounds like they're still in compliance with their license, but there's definitely some concerns about productivity. Paul, was that DOFA's assessment as well?
I believe so. The last I've seen, as far as I can tell, they have not had incidental take since 2013. That could be wrong, but I haven't seen anything since then. So from that standpoint, yeah, it seems they're in compliance.
And like Paul indicated, the HCP was extended on the federal side, but has not been formally extended yet on the state side.
Correct.
So wasn't this complex at one time really successful for stilts?
Yes, it was. This was the thing with the airport.
Yeah, they had a pond that was called their overflow pond that they would channel water from their raceways into that, and it was really quite a nice place. It was like a huge old swimming pool, well, bigger than that, like a quarry kind of a thing, that had straight walls. It was really predator free. They had islets in the middle of it, and it was just fantastic. Called the lake. And the productivity was higher than anywhere else in Hawaii, by all means, just by the nature of the size and the lack of predators there. But as Michelle said, the potential conflict as raised by FAA and state DOT on its proximity to the airport is what caused them to have to shut that down, which is really unfortunate because it was extremely productive. And I think the good news is, again, it seems like they have, by whatever means they're using, hazing in this case here, which at what point does that become take? But they are eliminating. They have been able to eliminate incidental take based on their records.
My understanding is that deterrents in the past were pyrotechnics, just based on information I found through reports.
Yeah, are they not doing that anymore? That was one of the big ones. That was a big part of it. Yes.
It seems from what I gather, they're working on a, I don't know that they're doing that right now. The current report that I believe I circulated to you folks doesn't say anything about that, but Lance did indicate that they're working on determining a deterrence method, and that's all I've got.
I'll just raise for the group that I have larger concerns about what's going on with water birds on the Kona coast and whether or not we've got sufficient habitat over there to even sustain a viable population long term, and whether or not, even if there's sufficient habitat, there's adequate management and monitoring of that population to have it contribute to the needs of the species. But that's an ongoing issue, and there's good people working on it. It does not seem like it's in a good spot at the moment.
And previously, are they still doing it? Sanitech was working with KS in terms of management of one of their wetlands on the Kona coast. Is that still continuing? Opaiula, is that still continuing?
I don't know, Jim. I'll see
Because
if I
on
can find out.
Yeah, that seemed to be a very important habitat. And again, the thing, one of the things with the water birds certainly is predator control is a major lever to turn things to a more positive note.
I'll see if I can find out.
I know there was some question in terms of having the right permits and the agreements and so forth from KS, and there was some question in terms of how to parse out the credit because KS was also doing some predator control there to some degree. So I know it was somewhat confused, but we hadn't heard anything in the last several years in the report. So that's why it would be worthwhile to follow up on that and see where that is and whether that was part of their past mitigation.
I recall that as well. I kind of am getting the sense that that's not part of a mitigation package anymore, but I think KS is doing work out there. I just don't know for sure. Paul, is there anything further on this project that you want to try and talk through, or should we take a break before noon? It looks like we're going to lose Lisa.
Yeah, there is nothing else. I was going to suggest that we take a break. Maybe we could do a lunch break for about a half an hour. That'll give me some time to get in touch with Stephanie Franklin to see if she's available to chime in for the Nene SHAs, because I'll be presenting them and she may be able to chime in. And then I can also touch base with Namaka to see when and where she is with being ready.
Sounds good. Can we get back at 12:30?
That sounds good to me.
Melissa, Lisa, we'll see you after.
I have to leave at noon and unfortunately can't come back today. So my opinions on predation and all that kind of stuff. So it holds.
We'll channel you.
Thank you so much. And so sorry to miss. I love the presentation from Namaka on how wonderful that project is going. So sad to miss that. But anyways, thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll try and come back at 2 and see if you're still in the meeting. And if not, sorry to miss it as well.
We'll try and drag it out as long as we can.
Lovely to see you both.
Take care.
Thanks a lot. Hi, Namaka.
It looks like she's just coming on.
I saw that. I was just going to let her know that we're on break. But she doesn't seem to have a microphone. I don't know if she's having sound problems. I'll email her.
I see Reed too.
Okay. Namaka and Reed, if you can hear us, we're going to be on break until 12:30. I'll send you a quick email now, so we can go with your presentation at 12:30. I'm not sure, Namaka, if you're having problems with your microphone. I don't see a symbol indicating that you have microphone or sound.